I read an article on Switzerland and how they charge either the child or the parent $200 for every time that they say something racist. And they have a zero tolerance policy for racism, or at least from what I understand they did. I don't know if they still do. But is that a solution for solving the problem of racism? Well, if you think about the movie Inception or the anime film Paprika, Leonardo DiCaprio says that an idea is like a virus. Bob Marley, according to what I heard on one of Will Smith's movies, is he believed that racism was an actual virus that exists within someone's system, and that we could give an antiviral or a shot to cure that. And the idea is not far off, but we're not thinking about a biological virus, are we? And all information is equal to particles. That's how we get binary. So information viruses could actually be a physical virus. Or, so what if we think about that for a sec? Can you eradicate racism? Well, you probably can't do it with a drug, but if you think about how viruses spread, and an information virus or a computational virus dies the same way that a human virus, a biological virus, would die. So you can think of how we would infect a computer with racism. And so that's as simple as we need a host, such as a computer or a person. And our brains are computers because they process information. They're basically, at the most basic unit, Turing tests, or Turing machine. They're very different from a person. And so a computer doesn't understand what emotion is, but humans do. So if we replicate the way that a virus spreads within humans or computers, we can think of it replicates, it takes over memory, or it takes over a cell, and it continues to replicate, and it eventually kills the host. That's not the case or it crashes the computer. And so when someone has thought of a virus, one of the things about it is that when we delete something, it doesn't just stay in the computer, or it can go to the hard drive, the physical hard drive, or it can leave the computer altogether. I learned that from Leonard Susskind, listening to his lectures. He was a professor, or he is a professor at MIT. And so one of the things about data conservation is that if data follows the laws of conservation of chemistry, just the way that matter does, in an information sense, black holes do have entropy, which is a large part about space, and we know that because there's Hawking radiation, that things leave black holes just as much as they go in, even if it's in a minute amount, because black holes can store quite a bit of information through their thermodynamic systems. So one of the things that you can think about is if no one speaks about racism if they don't even mention the word. You can mention a word, but the word is the actual definition. It's not the word itself in logic. So if you have a word without a definition, then racism does not it does not exist in the current sense. But it's really a vague notion, and it's based on social context and social statements, and that can be reduced to propositional logic or calculus. And so the idea of this is that if you have a virus and one person has that virus, we call them the original host. So if you eradicate everyone, or nobody defines the word racism, then you could actually eliminate the idea of racism is the assumption you would make according to the argument in Switzerland. So if nobody talks about racism, it doesn't exist. But that's not true, because information is conserved, so it can't actually be destroyed. Even if the last person to host it did exist and they died without telling anyone, and no one else had, hypothetically, we'll say, told anyone. So therefore, does the idea, if it's original, die with the person? And that's the thing, is it doesn't. It leaves their mind and it goes somewhere in the environment. And so racism is really a compound meaning based off of all kinds of other words and their meanings and semantics that go together. And so this has theoretical applications just like it has real applications. But once the question then becomes, where did racism come from? Well, it came from those compounded words. In language, and people had a concept and they had to explain it. So if you were to do that and have only one person who actually understood what racism was or believed that it existed because they know the definition, how could we actually erase racism? Just like we do by isolating people, like we do with COVID. And so that's the thing, is ideas can't be erased once they're created. But what if somewhere that existed in the environment's information as a string of information, and it enters back into a person's mind at a random point? Would we, what if we could delete it completely? Well, that's the thing, is we could, but only if data is not conserved. And data is different from information, is what I understand from Leonard Suskind's talk. And so it's the idea that data is without context. It's content without context. And so that is what a definition could be. So you don't necessarily need the word racism. We could call it anything we want. And we would then have context once we use the word. But the word itself is like the parentheses around a set. And, yeah. So if the law of data conservation does exist, in that sense, and black holes have entropy, we could actually never get rid of that idea, but where did it come from? Well, it came, like I said, it came from compounded meanings of other words. And so it's really a vague notion, though, and that's why it depends on the context.